Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Ghana, Himalaya, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is here to celebrate a delightful picture book series all about horses and riding horses and all sorts of things about horses. Our guest is Abriana Johnson, the author of A to Z with Cowgirl Camryn. Hey, Abriana, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I can't wait to find out who Cowgirl Camryn is.
I can't wait to share.
Well, tell us all about her, please.
Yeah, so Cowgirl Camryn is a little feisty young lady that has a herd of animals, and she takes care of them. And through her stories, kids can learn about horses, farm life, horse husbandry, care, and also learning life lessons like teamwork and confidence and no bullying, things like that. So with the latest book, it's the alphabet, and it's kind of a agriculture, equestrian alphabet so that kids can learn some of the words that we use on a daily basis.
Yeah. So obviously, the first thing that comes to my mind is if you're living in rural North Carolina or the Midwest where there's animals and farming, that this would be a great book. But I think that this is a book that I would have picked up for my kids living here in the city in Boston. Can you make a pitch to those families that are living in urban areas and may never run into an alpaca why they should want to introduce Cowgirl Camryn to their kids?
Yes. It is so important to know where your food comes from and how it kind of gets to the store. You know, I've worked with kids and I'll ask them, do you know where your burger comes from? And they say the grocery store. It's like, okay, well, yeah, it made a pit stop there, but it comes from a cow. You know, it's so important to share those lessons with kids and also expose them to a different lifestyle. I mean, food is the, crux of our society. So sharing with them farming and taking care of animals, it just teaches so much more than just that. It teaches responsibility, compassion, teamwork. I mean, it's such a wholesome life that I think it's important for kids in the city and, in more rural areas to just know that and value it.
Yeah. I think that's real important. Giving kids an idea of where their food comes from. It's like I'm imagining that a lot of kids. I'm old enough that if we had hamburger, I saw my mom and my grandmother actually grind up the meat that we weren't using. They never bought packaged hamburger at home.
Yeah.
So I knew at least the hamburger came. It was something else before it was ground up. I think I understood that it was a cow, but I'm imagining that there are a lot of kids that just don't think about it. It's like, it comes in a package. That's it, What do you mean it comes from a cow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I doubt kids see anyone grind up meat nowadays.
Yes, I'm sure. Wow. How did you get interested in number one, horses and animals and writing for kids?
Yeah. So my father's side of the family used to own a hog farm, not like pig, like hog. So growing up, we would feed the hogs, and my grandma had this ancient cow that just was there. She lived to be like 35. And I was just always around animals. So when I was younger, I asked my dad, you can't really ride a cow, and the hogs were terrifying. So I was like, okay, can I ride horses? Let's try that out. And so he got me some lessons with a classmate of his, and I've been hooked ever since. So I've been riding horses since I was younger. I, in my sophomore year of college, purchased one and spent the last 9 years training him and working with him. And it wasn't until I started working with kids after college that I kind of realized that these stories of, cowboys in the past or people with horses, everywhere I went, it was just such a shock. You have horses, you ride horses. There was just so much confusion around it. So I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start writing books about this experience so that it can just be a little bit more normal. It won't be, when I step into a room, it won't be the first time a kid has seen a Black woman that is involved with horses. And that's how Cowgirl Camryn was born.
Yeah, I was sharing it. There's so much that I want to go into, and remind me to go back to ask you why you made such a kind of drew a line under. My dad had hogs, not pigs, so I want to get back to that at one point. But
yes,
I was speaking with Abriana before the interview started that there's this history, a deep, rich history of Black cowboys and cowgirls or cowwomen that was completely off my radar. I had no idea that Black men and women were so influential in the cowboy culture and in the early history of the West. Can you talk a little bit about that and why we might not be aware of that?
Yeah. So the term cowboy was actually pretty derogatory way back in the day, because you wouldn't call a white man a boy. That was just disrespectful. That was a term, reserved for minorities. So when it was time to, move cattle or wrangle wild Mustangs, it was the cowboy's job, and it was dangerous. So a lot of the, wealthy people didn't want to get injured, but they knew that, a lot of the people who were freed from slavery or some of the enslaved people that they moved to the West would take the chance. So that is where the term cowboy came from. Now, once these people got really, really good at what they were doing, a light bulb kind of went off and said, okay, this could actually be profitable. This could make money. And so that was when you start to see a change and a kind of erasure of the impact that Black and brown cowboys or vaqueros, Hispanic cowboys made in the West. I don't know if you watch Westerns, but the Lone Ranger was actually created after a famous Black cowboy. But, Hollywood a lot of times erases the color of that person simply because it wouldn't sell as much initially. So it's just so important to kind of know kind of this history, this backstory, because there were so many influential people way back in the day that really make an impact on the rodeo scene and the kind of cowboy culture that we have today.
It's amazing. As you were saying, I think you just finished getting the word derogatory out of your mouth when a light bulb went off over my head going, okay, yeah, I get how that started off.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I
Once you
never
hear
thought
about
of
it, it makes sense.
it just never occurred to me. And then, boom. There's a lot of that in our society, things that we just kind of take for granted these days that had a kind of an ugly birth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Abriana, who are some of the black cowboys from history that we should really know about?
There are, cowboys like Bill Pickett and Nat Turner, that, just really, those are the ones that you'll find, when you just do a quick Google search, and there's, a whole rodeo named after Bill Pickett. There's whole events that he spurred. And that was another thing, when the black cowboys wanted to compete in rodeos, they would have to go after the rodeo ended. They got their chance to do their event once people started leaving. And then people started staying for after the rodeos. So, then that was when they were able to compete with the rest of the cowboys there. So there are a lot of champions out there that, even before we get to modern times, they really made a difference in the West.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that we, as parents, recognize that there's been a lot of history that's been covered up and hidden from us. And how can we kind of share that with our young kids?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the best way would be to kind of help our kids understand that, yes, this is history, and we believe we can trust this source, but maybe we need to dig a little bit further to see if there's anything that's been left out?
Yeah. So, outside of Cowgirl Camryn books, there are tons of books that are, that touch on these stories. I think it's also just important to instill in children to continue to ask questions, especially when something just seems a little bit too convenient, a little bit of, a plate that's just a little too proper. It's like, what is another story behind this? What else is there? And encouraging kids to be that inquisitive is just really important, not only for, learning about black cowboys, but how to approach life anyway, just asking those additional questions that bring forth clarity. That's just an important skill to instill in children. And I just looked it up real quick. It's Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves is the cowboy that the Lone Ranger character was created after. Awesome.
I love that idea of encouraging our kids to ask questions. They do it so naturally when they're babies, to the point where our head's about to explode.
Exactly.
Why is the sky blue? Why, all this stuff. But at some point they stop asking questions, and maybe that should, be one of we always talk about things, warning signs, or things parents should be aware of. And behavior changes. Maybe that's one of the behavior changes we as parents should be aware of. When they stop asking why, maybe we should go back and say, what do you think? And encourage them to start asking that again.
Yeah, definitely. When you start seeing that change in interest, it's really, really important to foster that continued questioning, by asking them what they think. And that's how you build critical thinkers. If they're not asking questions, ask them questions. They usually stop asking questions because society tells them, that's none of your business, or I don't owe you an answer. And that's not the kind of adults we want them to grow into be. So.
Absolutely not. I don't know about you, Abriana, but, when I get those answers, that's not for you to know, none of your business, that's when I am most curious.
Exactly.
Especially if it's coming from an authority figure.
Exactly.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah. We want to build, children that are more intentional members of society. And to do that, you have to be willing and open to educate yourself. But if we shut them down at a young age, and only encourage them to ask questions about, things that are convenient, we won't have those intentional members of society.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with a parent when my kids were in school, and a parent came up to me, and our family was very involved with our church, and this parent said, "Oh, I love seeing your kids. They're involved, and I see them up in the altar, and they're serving, and it's wonderful, and your kids are going off to college now, and I am so scared. When my daughter goes off to college, she's not as involved, and I'm afraid, college is when they start asking questions about their faith, and I'm so afraid about that." And I just turned to her and I said, "No, you should celebrate that. Because if your faith can't stand up to some questions, then there's an issue with the faith, not with the questions."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think the same is true with our history, or the history that's being taught in our schools, and with science, and with everything. Encourage your kids to politely challenge and ask questions in every area of their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. You also, Abriana, you're the host of a really cool podcast, Young Black Equestrians. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So on Young Black Equestrians, we talk about the passion, culture, and lifestyle of the Black horse industry. So we cover, more historical figures like Bass Reeves and Bill Pickett and all that. But we also talk to people who are in the horse industry today who may feel like they are the only ones, they're the only person of color at their barn, or they just haven't grown up with anyone who looks like them, who rides horses. And we just give them the opportunity to share their story, just like I'm doing here today, and saying, what got you into this? We all know horses are such incredible beings. They allow you to not only observe how you interact with other animals non-verbally, but they allow you a glimpse into yourself and the challenges and the obstacles that you have to come over internally so that you can be the best person that you can be. So understanding that, we just want to give some shine to these regular people and just say, hey, you don't have to be, in front of cameras or have some major achievement to be acknowledged. We value you just simply because you exist. And that's what we bring to our YBE family and the community that we've built around that podcast.
So cool. I love that idea that you just said. Horses allow you to take a glimpse into yourself. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How, because I know that the relationship, I've mentioned to you, my nephew was a professional cowboy for many years, and I've had been friends with people, most of them women, who were equestrians. And there is this passion that exists in that community that is really unique.
Yeah. So, horses are flight animals. They are, they run. They run first, fight second. If they are by themselves, they don't have that herd around them. They don't feel that protection. So they're flight animals. So they're, the first thing they think of is running. And then they are herd animals. So they are more comfortable in groups. A lot of situations around horses now, they're kind of by themselves. Like if they're in a stall or, when you're out riding, you end up being that horse's herd. So when you approach a horse and you have, the stress of the day or the anxiety of something coming up soon, they can sense that and they will shy away and say, hey, I'm a flight animal. You have the energy that something is troubling. Something is scary. So I will protect myself and run away. And obviously, you don't want that kind of relationship with your horse. So it teaches you to kind of look within yourself and say, hey, this is what I am observing from my horse. Naturally, he's going to run away from things that are intimidating. So what am I doing, or what am I projecting, or what kind of energy do I have that is making my horse intimidated and that he wants to be away from me? Because naturally he's a herd animal. He should want to be near me, So having that space of kind of introspection and saying, hey, what's going on? This is what I observe. So it teaches you to be more observant. If you don't, you could get hurt. And then turning that back around and saying, what does that say about me? What does that say about the energy that I possess? And that's pretty much the relationship. I mean, that is why so many people are just so simply passionate, because you can see the becoming of yourself in your relationship with your horse. And that is addicting, honestly.
Wow. That probably explains why the 3 occasions that I've been on horseback, I got tossed off.
Because you were terrified.
I was absolutely terrified. The first time I went on, I got thrown off, and then a couple of years later, someone said, try it again. I'm like, oh, no, I'm terrified. And I got it back on, I got thrown off again.
Yeah. And that's honestly why I have, so I purchased a miniature horse who is the spitting image of my large horse. So now I have like a big one and a little one, and they look just alike. And that is why he's a character in the Cowgirl Camryn books. It's a lot easier for people to digest horses at a miniature level, especially with children who is their first time seeing horses. So he's down on their level, and, he will sniff their face and sniff their clothes, and they kind of feel more confident around them. And then when it comes time to get to the bigger ones, they already have that positive experience around the horses anyway. So he's a character in the books. And when I do my readings, I, read the book and say, you guys, I have a surprise for you. And, out jumps Encore out of the Minimobile, and the kids are just ecstatic.
That's wild. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And we meet a lot of characters in the books. I understand there's an alpaca. And who else?
And a donkey. Her name is Lola.
Awesome.
So.
Boy, I probably shouldn't share this, but one of the dumbest things that I ever did in my life, I mentioned that I had friends who were equestrians and they competed, and I went to an equestrian event one time and was, I guess, and backstage isn't the word, but that's, as a performer, that's what I thought. I was backstage where all the tents were and the horses, and one of the horses broke free and started running around the backstage area. And me, thinking I was going to save the day, stood in front of the horse.
No.
And thankfully the horse took a left. And my friend came up to me and said, yeah, so what were you going to do? And I go,
right.
I don't know. I just thought.
Yeah, no. A lot of times you just let them go until they calm down. They have that flight that, they're going to run until they see something that's like, oh, I should stop here. It's probably okay to stop here. And you were not that.
I was not. I would have just been a stain on the path. Well, that brings me back to something I wanted to ask you earlier. You put a big exclamation point when you're talking about your dad raising hogs and not pigs. Why was it important for you to put that exclamation point there?
Because I think a lot of people think pigs are cute and, they're really smart and, people have little ones in their houses and things like that. And that was not, that wasn't the farm life that my father grew up with. It was, we had these hogs and we would like feed them bread and stuff like that. But it was always told to us, if you fall in there, they will eat you. So, it kind of is just a tribute to how tough of a man my father was. Mm-hmm. And honestly, when I purchased my horse in college, he's like, okay, what are you going to train him to do? Is he going to pull a plow? Is he going to pull a cart? And I was like, why do you think he has to work? Mm. And then I realized, he grew up on a farm. The horses were tools. Mm-hmm. They weren't something to create a relationship with and to grow and just show off and brush their hair. No, they were created to achieve a goal, to help you feed your family. This horse had to plow the field so that you could, pull up the vegetables, things like that. And so he was just so confused. And, after years of that horse, he just knew I was a lost cause when I got the little one, but it just is, that is something that I always knew, where my food came from and how hard farmers had to work to produce that. And so that's always been a value that I've had, because my dad had to do that growing up. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, thank goodness for your dad and for all the farmers out there, especially when we think back to, this past 16, 18 months where so many of us were locked down and locked in the house and keeping ourselves safe. Meanwhile, people like your dad, people who were working on the farms, they had to be there because otherwise we wouldn't eat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow. So many lessons that families and so many conversations that can happen with families as they're reading A to Z with Cowgirl Camryn and the other two books that are in the series. Just let us know about those other two titles, please.
Yeah. So the first book is Cowgirl Camryn and the Crazy Hair Day. And Cowgirl Camryn is trying to figure out what hat she's going to wear to go feed her herd of animals. This book particularly touches on, the connection of hair and, Black women figuring out what we're going to do with it, because it's crazy. It's, can be all puffy and things like that. So that is the first one. And then the second one is Cowgirl Camryn and the Great Escape. And after she goes out and, is ready to feed her herd, she realizes that Encore, the mini horse, is missing. So her and the other two, Alfie and Lola, look for him and find him where a fence board has fallen. So not only does he come back, on the inside of the fence, on the right side of the fence, they have to work together to fix it. And that just plays ode to horse people everywhere. There's always something we need to fix. There's always someone escaping or being where they're not supposed to be. So that just kind of gives a glimpse into the lifestyle of animal care and making sure everyone is accounted for and working together to keep up the property and make sure everybody's safe.
Awesome. And I'm going to ask you to let everybody know where they can go to find out more about you and about your books. But first, I just want to let you know, you definitely want to check out Abriana's website because there's a lot of information there, but there's also a great picture of Encore the Mini. And am I seeing this right? Is Encore wearing sneakers?
Yes. So when we go in buildings, his hooves, they're like toenails. So he slips on the floors. Thankfully he's small enough to wear Build-A-Bear sneakers. So he has Converses, boots, cowboy boots. He's got more shoes than me.
All right.
But we just get 2 pair at a time, and it's always a good laugh. But it's a function. It helps him when we're inside, so he doesn't slide on the floor.
All right. Well, Abriana, tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Cowgirl Camryn and see this adorable picture of Encore the Mini.
Yes. You can go to my website, cowgirlcamryn.com. It's CAMRYN. And then you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Cowgirl Camryn.
Awesome. And I know there's some folks that are interested in your podcast. Where can they find young Black equestrians?
Yeah. So same on Facebook and Instagram, Young Black Equestrians, all lowercase, all together. And then our website is youngblackequestrians.com. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube, actually.
Awesome.
We post all of our interviews on YouTube as well.
We've had a great time speaking about Cowgirl Camryn, about horses, about why I've been tossed off all the horses I've ever been on, and so much more with our guest, Abriana Johnson. Hey, Abriana, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast with 2 great authors on for you, Gabe Jensen and Anne-Marie Girton. That's the next episode of the podcast. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, want to start by thanking our guest, Abriana Johnson. Be sure to check out A to Z with Cowgirl Camryn. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Helen Frazier, Justina Thompson. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to join together to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.